everyone, and welcome to this edition of Welcome to My World. I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly of the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and this video series is a lot about me chatting with somebody whose life is different than mine, about at least one of the ways in which it's different, and hopefully we can all learn a little bit about each other, really is what it comes down to. And I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Neil Singh. Neil, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. Happy to be here.
Neil is a geotechnical engineer. I don't know what that means. He's got a couple of degrees. He designs dams for a living, but really the reason he's here and the reason we know each other is that he spent 30 years as a volunteer with UrbanPromise. He turned 55 last year and began a transition towards full-time volunteer service with Urban. He's married with 3 children, a nurse, a chemist, and an engineering student, and he lives in Surrey, British Columbia, which is a suburb of Vancouver, which I'm very jealous of because I'm desperate to go visit Vancouver, but the COVID. With his wife Elaine and their cats Edmund and Lucy, fantastic names. His vision statement is to be a good father who creates partnerships that seek justice. And in my years of knowing Neil, I can say absolutely that you do that. So Neil and I know each other because we both serve on the board of UrbanPromise International, but that is not the only branch of this nonprofit that Neil's involved in. So I'm going to turn this over and tell us a little bit about Urban and tell us a little bit about your role in Urban.
Sure. Maybe I'll start a little bit with my role with Urban, because that kind of tells the story about what Urban is a little bit. So I first got involved, like you said, 30 years ago. 1991 was the first time I volunteered with Urban as an intern, a summer intern in Camden, New Jersey. Went down there not knowing what to expect. I was a young university student and a new Christian, and I went there just looking to serve, looking to help, and realized that as much as I loved working with kids, because that's what UrbanPromise did, it was an inner city after school and summer programs for kids in under-resourced neighborhoods. Wow, that was hard work. And it was maybe not my calling, my very real skill set, but loved it.
My internships with Urban taught me the same thing. I was like, you know what I'm not good at? Kids.
It's like, kids, they're great, but holy smokes, they're a lot of work. But there, I also found there was tons of people who were really, really good at working with kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes they weren't really, really good at being organized. And I kind of got the nickname that first summer as Mr. Pragmatic, because I was the one who was always organized. I had the like people would say, hey, does anyone have a pen? And I'd pull out 4 and say, what color? And that sort of thing. Like just, and as much as I loved working with the kids, and I still actually keep in touch with some of those kids from that first summer, and it was fantastic, and it made an impact on my life. I realized there was a better use of my skill set, and so over the years, Urban UrbanPromise has grown to something like 30 sites around the world.
I think we're close to that. Yeah.
And one of those sites started in Vancouver in 1998, and I was on the founding board for UrbanPromise Vancouver. And so I've been involved in Vancouver as well now and I'm the current board chair. I've taken different roles over the years with UrbanPromise Vancouver. And so I serve more on it. I find my skill set lends itself to the strategic planning, to the administration, to the as boring as that stuff is, it's not the fun stories about working with kids. And as much as I love that, and I get life from those stories, my skill set lends itself to helping support people, helping support the ministry, helping organize and administer the ministry. And so Urban started with this after-school program in Camden, New Jersey. It spread through now to, I think it's about a dozen sites in North America, maybe a little less, including Vancouver. I've been involved there. And then in 2008, something like that, Urban went international, and they began in Malawi, and they are now in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Honduras, in Colombia, Liberia. I'm probably missing a couple.
Yeah, I think we're in Nigeria too. Are we in Uganda? We're in Uganda.
And Uganda, yes,
Yep,
that's right.
with Joyful Hearts and Millie. Yep.
Yep. And and so that really grabbed me. As an engineer, I've worked in a lot of countries around the world, and with my cultural heritage being from India, I've seen real poverty. I've seen people living, in conditions that we can't even really imagine in North America, and so when Urban began looking international, it really grabbed me, and I talked to Bruce, and I ended up joining the Urban Promise International board as well, and so I currently serve on the sustainability committee with UPI, and what I what I enjoy about that is, again, it's this opportunity to walk alongside the leaders, the local leadership, and provide support, provide service, help plan, help the administration side of things. So that's what I'm really excited about. It's these opportunities to walk alongside and support.
Yeah, and just to give everybody else a little bit of background, the Bruce that Neil just mentioned is Dr. Bruce Main, who is the like grand poobah of all things Urban Promise. And it like titles don't mean anything when it comes to Bruce. Like he just is Urban Promise in a lot of ways. And I've been involved with Urban Promise almost as long. It's been about 30 years, and just from a really different perspective than Neil. So one of the things that Urban is really prides itself on is also local employment of young people to mentor other young people. And that's part of the infrastructure that makes Urban really different, is that we have these things called street leaders, and they change a little bit everywhere, but it's essentially teenagers that we pay and train and mentor to work with kids. And then in some locations, we've got schools that also work. We do in Camden, and we do in a couple sites in Malawi. But essentially what it comes down to is it's an educational nonprofit that believes in the power of youth and believes in the power of Indigenous leadership, which is very important, especially when we come to the legacy of colonialization in Africa, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and kind of what Christianity has both positively and negatively brought to that area of the world. Urban seeks to be one of the things that is a restitution for that in a way, and empowering local folks. But when I think specifically about engineering and building dams, I'm assuming that understanding like physical land and stuff like that is a big part of how your brain works, and understanding that not just people need to be organized, but we have to be in relationship with the land in a way. And so could you tell us a little bit about that process of the work in Malawi, for instance?
Sure. Okay. And I just, before I get into that, I want to just emphasize what you said about local leadership, and one of the core beliefs of Urban, it is that those who are closest to the problems are also those who are closest to the solutions, and I really believe that, and I see that developed through the different sites. So that brings us to your question about the land, about organization, of infrastructure, about development, and so one of the sites, for example, is Seeds of Promise, and I love Seeds. It's run by a couple of young Malawans, Luwani, Sweet Lou, we call them, and McLean, and so Big Mac and Sweet Lou, and and um, and so they bought a farm. They bought 45 acres of land, and they are in the process of developing a self-sustaining model farm using. There's a lot. Malawi is a farming nation. It's a subsistence farming economy. And
yeah, and tobacco is one of the biggest crops, or was at one point. I know that's a huge part of the economy there.
absolutely, it was. It's still a part.
Okay.
One of the other executive directors, a fellow named Peter, his family used to have acres and acres of tobacco farm, and they've really struggled with the changing
Demand for tobacco. Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And so the tobacco companies have actually really squeezed these local farmers because the demands have fallen off, and so yet they still need a certain amount of farmland for tobacco. So getting back to Mac and Lou, they've taken this land. They've learned methods of irrigation. They're looking at ways of building dams. This is an area where
you happen to be an expert in the area. How convenient! Yeah,
and we're looking at ways, because Malawi has one rainy season of 2.5-3 months a year, and then it's dry. And if you don't have enough water to last the year, now most countries have ways of storing water. So you build a dam, you store water through you use it through the dry season. You may have some, the worst effect in North America is, well, you can't water your lawn on Thursdays or something like that.
Yeah.
But in Malawi, if you don't have water, you don't have crops, you don't have food, you don't eat, you don't drink. The years of there was a 5-year period not that long ago where it was drought, and they had to, a very poor country went further into debt as they had to buy food from other nations.
Yeah,
they weren't able. There was many people who didn't survive, and to be able to eat by choice, not by chance. That's statement is a blessing. It's an opportunity that many in Malawi don't have. We take it for granted. We're hungry. We go down to the grocery store, right? We go down to one of 30 grocery stores.
Yeah.
And
I'm in a technical food desert sitting here in where my factory is, and there's still 7 to 10 bodegas, a Walmart, a Target, and a ShopRite. And that's because of location, it's still a food desert comparatively according to US standards, but not according to global ones for sure.
Exactly. And so the ability to have food security,
is so massive.
Water security, power security, all of these elements that we take for granted. The physical security, these elements of that we take for granted. Yes, we have crime. Yes, we have some issues, but not like these day-to-day lack of security that is just taken for granted in places like Malawi. We assume that we're going to have water, and so you look at Texas this last few weeks, and the rolling brownouts and the lack of power for 5 days was catastrophic. Imagine that every day, every week, right? Not knowing if you're going to have power, food, water, or security, and not knowing that in a week or so it will get better, right? Or
and what is better, and what is a sustainable better, and so that's a huge part of, I know, your work with Seeds of Promise, is this idea of how do we make sustainable solutions that don't just grow for a season and then are done. And because a huge part of the international programs, especially, I'll say this, is feeding programs for students. So whereas in Camden, we're not quite as concerned with making sure, we definitely do feeding programs in Camden, but it's not quite as essential as feeding programs in most of Malawi, Kenya, and Uganda. And so the idea of providing food is a really important part of the mission of a lot of these organizations.
Well, I mean, I was talking to Ishmael a week or so ago, and he was telling us, our the number of kids who've been coming to program has dropped in half over the last couple of months, and that's because the effects of COVID have really had an impact on the economy, on local farms, and so kids haven't been able to, families haven't been able to earn enough to buy food. So they're keeping their kids home. They're keeping their kids on the farm. They're scrounging everything they can to try and eke out that living on the soil, and that's why kids aren't coming to camp. In that would never happen in North America. And
certainly not as widespread as it is everywhere else. Like certainly, like there's always, like there's pockets of abject poverty and there's pockets of what this looks like, but that's usually a failure of the state rather than, or a failure of the community rather than, not of the community itself, but like of the larger North American community, especially when we talk about indigenous reservations.
Absolutely.
That is different in Malawi, where it's so much like when I was there, I remember having conversations about the days that they walked to get water and like telling us ahead of time, by the way, you're not going to have a shower on these 5 days because we don't have water and things like that. It's just so different. And I was reminded as you were talking about kind of the trajectory of your life in a way, like there's a Brooke Fraser song called Albertine. She's a New Zealand singer-songwriter. And I first heard this song when I was in Rwanda. And the chorus is, "Now that I have seen, I am responsible." And I think that is what you just shared with us, that you've seen these things and you have this expertise. You don't know, like you say you're not great with kids. I'm not either. And the idea of just forcing yourself to become great with kids so that you could help in that way is not the point. The point is to take the things we already have. Now that we have seen, we are responsible, and to react to that in a pragmatic way that supports local leadership, but also allows the privilege that you have of a Western education and a really high class one, and the incredible intelligence that you have to walk alongside people and enrich the lives of everyone around them. And that's being responsible with what you have seen.
Yeah, absolutely, Kristen. I mean, like I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't. And like I said earlier, those who live in those communities, like Mac and Peter and Ishmael, they know the problem.
They have the solutions. They usually just need our cash. It's usually what it comes down to.
Often you're not far off. And you hear the teach a man to fish and he fishes, but if you feed him so that he learns how to fish a lot better. And
exactly. You should also feed him while giving him a fishing pole.
Why can't you also feed him and the fish, right? And so it's kind of that sort of like, let's walk alongside. You tell us what the solutions are. We'll help you and we'll support you in finding those solutions. But hey, if you're starving, here's some food.
Yeah, people can't function if they're hungry. It's not. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a reality for a reason. Nothing else matters until you've got food, water, clothing, and security. Like it just doesn't matter.
That's right. So our goal is to educate. Our goal is to teach and prepare these emerging leaders and to facilitate their visions. When you look from, each of these 30 Urban Promise sites, every single one is different, which is fantastic.
It's so much fun. Yeah.
It's so much fun. And there's no cookie cutter, here's an Urban Promise site. there might be elements,
Yeah,
things
there's a
like
model, but the
sure,
model becomes indigenous really quickly and becomes
really quick.
incarnational really quickly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dream code. Teaching computer literacy to kids in Nigeria. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing,
It's one of
right?
my favorites. Well, they're all my
It,
favorite, but yeah, yeah.
Voices Awake with Vanessa, with who has created a safe home and a girls empowerment program where she is just the
Crushing it. Yeah.
advocate for her girls, right?
Mhm.
And youth cares where they've brought kids off the street, we've seen kids from youth cares who when they were 4 years old were living under cars on the street because it's warmer at night if you find a car that's recently been run, and they were learning how to survive at 4 years old, brought off the street and now going to university, and getting that education. But before you can get the education, you got to bring them off the street. You got to feed them. You got to gain their trust. And these the fact that these organizations are run locally, run by indigenous local leadership, envisioned by that local leadership, who see the problem and know how to work with the system, um, is amazing. And it's so much fun to just walk alongside and to provide a little bit of support. And I think I sometimes think I'm I'm almost fooling myself that I'm actually doing anything, and I hopefully I am helping here and there. But at the end of the day, if I wasn't involved, these young leaders would be doing the work that needs to be done, and that's amazing to me. So I'm blessed to be able to help. I'm blessed to be able to walk alongside, where I can. I help. Sometimes, you know, sometimes it helps. Sometimes, it doesn't. I do my best, but it's a fantastic way to sort of transition out of an engineering career into the next phase, of my life. So,
And it's so encouraging. We talk so much these days about what people are going to be doing in retirement, and like retirement being pushed back and back and back, and retirement looks a lot different depending on what country you're in, and kind of the state's resources there. But I love this idea that instead of really retiring, all you've done is shift your client base in a way, and kind of what that looks like, and that dream continues. Um, Obviously we both believe really strongly in urban promise. There are places the model hasn't worked, and there are places, but honestly, I've been spending, I don't know, 20 odd years looking at international development, and I've never seen one that adapts as quickly as this and allows for both local mistakes and local support as much as this one does. And if you've got spare cash, the links will be in the show notes below so that we can plant build more farms and build more schools, and encourage more leaders. Because really what Neil brings to the board is an incredible technical expertise and also a real gift at building relationships with our staff members. I just think I like to bring sarcasm and jokes. But a lot of my role is making sure that when the fellows do come to America, because that's part of our program, is making sure that they have been asked some really hard business questions so that when they go back and start nonprofits, which are businesses, they are prepared to serve their community as responsibly and effectively as possible, with the stuff that they've done. So I love asking tough questions. All of you who watch this are shocked that I love asking questions, but I also love walking alongside our fellows. And COVID has put a damper in that for all of us, for sure. And we're looking forward to the new reality where we can still safely interact with other folks. But if you've listened to Neil's incredible conversation and eavesdropped on us in this, and you're somebody who's also taken, just kind of shifted your clientele as you've done different processes, or if you work with a nonprofit that we'd love to hear about, or if you're also on a board, because being a board is a very different thing than being on staff. And I've done both, and Neil's obviously done both, and we kind of know all the sides to that. But I'd love to hear from you and feature you maybe in another video. You can feel free to comment below as we do that. And please like Urban Promise because it's really cool. And we're really, really proud of it. So Neil, thank you so much for joining me today, and this opportunity not only to just catch up a little bit, but to talk about the incredible work that our folks are doing.
Really good to see you again, Kristen. Let's keep in touch, and thanks for having me today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, everybody, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.